was sent for from St Omer near Calais. Imagine the scene on the day of the execution. Straw lay all around that scaffold, mainly to absorb the blood, but also to hide the sword, which was wrapped in some sack beneath the straw. The Queen was on her knees with her head bowed in prayer, and the executioner stood directly behind her. When he thought the time was right, he very quietly went down on his knee, pulled out that sword, and held it in readiness above Queen Anne. And then, surprisingly, he shouted, "Bring me my sword!" This startled Anne in such a way that she looked up, at which point he smote her head from her body with one quick, clean strike. In fact, it was so precise, even the Queen herself did not know it had happened. We are told that when the executioner bent down to pick up Queen Anne's head to show the 1,000 who had assembled, they as one gasped! They as one gasped! They all gasped! They could see her eyes moving, fixing and focusing on people on the crowd. Then they gasped again! A bit late now. They could see her lips were trembling and moving, muttering in silent prayer. Now the head and the body were placed into an elm box, taken into the chapel and buried beneath the altar. And that's where she is to this day. 5 years passed, the next victim was to be King Henry VIII's own auntie, Margaret Pole. She had done absolutely nothing wrong. All she had done was have a son who'd grown up to become Cardinal Reginald Pole, and he was going around Europe drumming up support for the Pilgrimage of Grace, a small rebellion in the north of England. Now the king couldn't punish the son, so he decided to punish the mother instead. But the proud old lady refused to place her neck on the block. She said, "That's for traitors, and I'm not a traitor." And she jumped off the scaffold and ran down towards the bloody tower. The executioner took off after her. When he caught up with her, he hacked her to pieces down there. A truly horrific end to a 67-year-old lady. Within a year, the axe was to fall again twice on the same day. This time on the pretty young neck of Queen Catherine Howard and her lady-in-waiting, Jane Boleyn. Now, Queen Catherine did not want to make the same mistake as Queen Anne. But she tried really hard to have a baby. Really, really hard. But not necessarily with the king. Now, she was accused of having a number of affairs, but it was the one with Thomas Culpeper that would be her undoing. And she is reported to have said, scaffold side, "Today I stand before you, the Queen of England, but I would much rather be the wife and lover of the only man I truly love, Master Thomas Culpeper." She probably shouldn't have said that. Thomas Culpeper certainly thought so. He was at the back like this. Jane Boleyn was Anne Boleyn's sister-in-law, and she was executed within 1 hour. Queen Catherine, her crime was setting up all those liaisons. Now, the last queen to die here was Lady Jane Grey, and it's a very tragic story of a young girl brought all the way down here from Leicestershire by her ambitious relative. Her father was Henry Grey. He was the Duke of Suffolk. Her father-in-law was John Dudley, the Duke of Northumberland. Now, he had been an advisor to Edward VI, the son of Henry VIII. Edward VI was a Protestant, but he was a sickly child, and he knew he was dying. So under the advice of John Dudley, he named Lady Jane Grey as the rightful heir to the throne, because she's a Protestant, because she's related to him, and because she's legitimate. And that's pretty convenient for John Dudley, isn't it? To put his own daughter-in-law on the throne. Not very convenient for Mary Tudor, though, who arrived here 8 days later with a strong Catholic army. Mary, of course, was the eldest daughter of King Henry VIII. Support for Lady Jane Grey's claim to the throne quickly dissolved. She was arrested and taken to number 5 Tower Green. Her young husband, Guildford Dudley, was arrested and taken into the Beauchamp Tower. And that's where they languished for about 8 months while Mary made up her mind what to do with them. We think she was thinking about pardoning them because she knew they were just pawns in a power struggle. But unfortunately, the Thomas Wyatt rebellion flared up in Kent, over there, in support of that young couple's claim. And that doomed them. From her windows, Lady Jane Grey would have been able to look out and watch as the executioners prepared the scaffold site. From her windows, Lady Jane Grey would have been able to look out on that very cold, frosty February morning, February the 12th, 1554, and watch as her young husband, Lord Guildford Dudley, just 18 years old, was dragged out of the Beauchamp Tower. He was wearing his finest clothes, his hands were tied behind his back, and tears were streaming down his face. Across the cobblestones and down those steps he went, and then Lady Jane Grey would have heard a big cheer come up from the hill. Within an hour, Guildford Dudley's headless, lifeless corpse was returned to the tower in that handcart I told you about, brought right up to the scaffold and literally tipped out. Then it was the turn of Lady Jane Grey. She left number 5 dressed all in her mourning clothes now because she's a widow. She walked across that grass with great calmness and dignity. When she arrived at the scaffold, she had to hitch up her skirts to step over her husband's still steaming corpse. and then she climbed the steps. At the top of those steps she was met by a priest, and they both sank to their knees to pray. Once the prayers were complete, Lady Jane Grey looked up at the executioner and she begged him to dispatch her quickly. And then in an act of mercy, the priest stepped forward and tied a blindfold around the girl's face. Now we're told Lady Jane Grey breaks down. She starts to tremble and shake. She starts to cry. She calls out, "Help me, I don't know what to do." You see, in her anxiousness to pray, she's kneeling just a little bit too far away from that block, and now with a blindfold on, she can't find it. And she knows that if she doesn't find it soon, the execution's going to start, whether she's ready or not. It's going to be yet another horrific execution. Fortunately for her, the priest saw her plight, he grabbed her hand, forced her onto the block. She then calmed down, she relaxed, she put her neck on the block, she put her hands out, she gave the signal, and the axe came crashing down. Now all of those people I mentioned were laid to rest in the Chapel Royal there.